This is Fox-11 Forum, a look at issues of concern to Tucson and Nogales, with your host, Bob Lee.
Good morning. Today is January 8th, 2012. We all remember where we were on this date a year ago. As with most Tucsonans, the news that quickly unfolded as noon approached on January 8 last year was almost incomprehensible. 6 people dead and 13 others wounded, including Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. But we are resilient. Tributes poured in, memorial funds were set up, and in the aftermath of the tragedy that many of us turned to music to help us through the pain and confusion. There was a huge concert March 10th featuring many national artists to benefit a charitable fund established after the shooting. Another project that began in the days after the January 8th shooting was Music Against Violence, a coalition of Tucson writers, recording engineers, and venue operators, which resulted in Luz de Vida. We'll be talking about that and the fund that's receiving all the money that's generated from it in just a minute. Luz de Vida, Light of Life, is a compilation of mostly Tucson-based musicians to benefit those affected by the shootings a year ago. My guests this morning are all connected to that project. Bill Carnegie is board chair of the Tucson Together Fund, the only official fund established to assist victims, families, and witnesses of the January tragedy. And Bill, of course, is also a president and CEO of the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona. James Tritten is a member of Music Against Violence. He's also the man behind local record label Fort Lowell Records that specializes in 7-inch vinyl-only records. And Eric Swedland is a member of Music Against Violence. He's also a writer. You can read him in the Tucson Weekly, a photographer, and also former Giffords for Congress communications director. Thank you very much for being with us today. And we want to talk about several things connected with things that sprang out of this date a year ago. I want to start by, I think we'd be missing something if we didn't at least talk a little bit about what we were doing when we learned the news a year ago. And I had just logged on to Facebook about 11:30 or so, and one of my friends said, "I just heard Gabrielle Giffords got shot." And as with much that you read on Facebook, you say, well, maybe. Let me turn on the TV, because I figured something that nature most likely would be on TV. And of course, when the TV came on, I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was one of those rare moments for me when I was speechless, and it was just very hard to comprehend that morning. Bill, what were you doing?
I was actually at home getting ready to go out. I received a phone call shortly after 10:30 that morning, and then tried to find something on the news, and there just really wasn't a lot of information. And you know, it was a really difficult time. Gabrielle is a strong supporter of the Community Food Bank and what we're trying to do here in Southern Arizona. And as the news unfolded, it was just tragic.
James, what were you doing?
I was at work that morning, and the news traveled fast through the building and just completely stopped every bit of business that was going on. It was completely devastating. So.
Eric, must have been pretty unusual for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I was working late Friday night, so I had a phone call that woke me up on Saturday morning. A friend who'd known I'd worked for Gabby, and he had just heard it on the NPR station. So shocking news, and I tried reading what I could online for quite a while, and ended up spending some time later that afternoon at the quickly growing memorial outside UMC.
Well, as we all know, there were certainly a lot of tributes, some of them visual around University Medical Center, but there was also financial tributes, and that leads us to, I guess, several funds, but one that you're involved in. Tell us kind of how that evolved and developed.
Well, the Tucson Together Fund came out of really a collaborative effort between the Safeway Foundation, Community Foundation of Southern Arizona, the County Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office. There were, we just thought that we needed to do something quickly to give a place where people could donate and to establish this fund, because we knew that there was going to be a lot of people are going to be responding that wanted to do something. So it was really Barbara Lawal that brought the parties together, and we really formed this rather quickly, and it was probably within 45 days we're already distributing funds that had been contributed early on.
And how are the funds being used? They're still being used and going to be used for quite a while.
Right, they're being used to pay for the expenses of the victims that are not covered by the other funds, whether it's the county victim witness funds or the U.S. Attorney's victim witness funds. There's restrictions on those government funds when they're available, like they can't pay for a lot of travel expenses for family members or replacement of clothes that might have been damaged that day, or replacement of cameras, or also there's some restrictions when it comes to counseling. The federal authorities tend to want a PhD or a psychologist that's actually doing the counseling, where our fund is much more generous, and we can use people that the families might have been already dealing with.
And that's the counseling is a big part of it, and it goes pretty far down the family line, you were telling me. Oh,
it does. That 6 people lost their lives that day. There's grandchildren involved. There's just the impact on these families is just tremendous, and many of them, even though it's been a year, that every Saturday at shortly after 10 a.m. they're still going through this experience. Then we have the survivors, the 19 or the 16 others that were shot that day, and it's just it's just so hard on those people, and there's going to be years of counseling and other things. A lot of our fund too pays for when and if there ever is a trial, to bring more family members in for support and help to pay those expenses.
And one of the things too is that's good about this is the Music Against Violence project, and the Luz de Vida music is helping to keep funds coming into this project, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Encourage me, you encourage me, with what you say, don't you ever change, and you're the only one, yeah, you're the only one for me.
Light of Life, Luz de Vida. You're hearing some cuts from that great compilation that was put together by Music Against Violence. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We're talking about also the Tucson Together Fund. Before we move into the music aspect of this bill, how much has been raised thus far?
We've raised, Bob, about $400,000, and we've at this point paid out about $150,000 in claims. But we know that this is a long process, and that
you were saying possibly 20 years.
Possibly 20 years. And we designed this fund after the September 11th fund in New York City, and also the Oklahoma City bombing, and understanding that victims' needs are not done at a particular point in time. So we want to make sure that there's funds available for the families as time moves on.
Well, that's one of the nice things, even as perhaps the public contributions per se start to dwindle, we have something like the Luz de Vida project, which is going to generate funds, and hopefully this thing will sell and continue to sell not only in the United States but worldwide. How did this particular project come about, and ultimately you get in touch with Bill?
Well, the root idea of doing a benefit compilation came from Nathan Sabatino and Tom Beach of Loveland Studio. The studio is nearby the former congressional office at Pima and Swan, and they'd see it day to day, drive by, and just feeling the need to do something. So Tom reached out to me, knowing that I'm a writer and had worked for Gabby before, and so we started talking about maybe what to do, what sort of bands to include, and realizing that we could get a pretty significant project out of this. So we talked to Stephen Siegel, the music editor of the Weekly, and Curtis McCrary and Ryan Tritten at the Rialto Theater initially to start, using some of their contacts to generate some of the bands and reach out to some national groups that have a good connection with Tucson, some bands that have recorded here or have lived here at different times, and just have a special place in their hearts for Tucson.
From time to time from Tucson.
Exactly, yeah. So.
Did you guys start talking before or after the March 10th concert at TCC?
It was before the March 10th, yeah. We were hoping to get some things going, and then we heard about that separately, and it was nice to see Calexico involved with that, because they were one of the bands that right away had been interested in contributing to the Luz de Vida.
And you guys are actively involved in the music scene. Had some of the local musicians mentioned to you at this time that they'd like to be involved in something that might develop as a tribute or as a fundraiser?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Hal Gelb of Giant Sand had written a song, specifically dealing with kind of the aftermath and the feelings. It's called Recovery, and he had recorded that, I believe, even before we reached out to him. So you could tell there's just a lot of interest in doing this. People felt compelled for different reasons to kind of add their own voice to the healing that this community needed.
So at what point, and you and Court, you're a not-for-profit, right? Music Against Violence?
Yeah, it's just a group.
That doesn't happen overnight. You guys are really working quickly. How did you then? It occurred to you, you know what? We better check in with Bill Carnegie's group.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talked to homicide survivors early on in the process just to, make them aware that we were doing this. Is there any kind of guidance or direction? And they were just thrilled that the music community was stepping out on a project like this. And then once the Tucson Together Fund became established, we reached out to Bill and kind of let him know about the project and asked him, any advice, any thoughts, and.
So, how did you then begin to collect and collate the music that we hear on this? Because this album, it was quite a while. This collection was quite a while in preparation. It was only released in the middle of October. Mm-hmm. So you spent some time on this. How did you begin accumulating the music?
Well, it's 37 songs, so it's an awful lot of work as far as even just the mastering that Jim Blackwood brought to us. But we knew we wanted some national bands to really generate some interest nationwide. Many of the local bands came into Loveland Studios and recorded new songs, and then as we were sort of at a midpoint of looking at the music we had, the idea came to reach out to James at Fort Lowell Records and really make this an official release. He's done a lot of work with vinyl, and we like that idea.
So you were talking about just a digital deal at first?
It had been initially. We didn't want any costs, associated. We wanted all the funds that are generated to go straight to the Tucson Together Fund.
So you contacted James, and James is already dealing in vinyl, but 7-inch, not 12-inch. How'd that conversation go?
Yeah, that was actually Curtis met me, caught me on the street randomly. No, it was randomly one night in town, and I had known about the project just from my work with Hal. He had actually told me about the song that he was doing, so I was already aware of it. Basically just asked if I could help them get this music online. Is that an easy process? And it actually is. It's not too complicated. Everything's already set up. We have those outlets established as a company already. So it was absolutely be happy to help. This is something that fits in line with what our record label is all about. And we started from that perspective, and then pretty much once we all started listening to the songs as Tom was finishing the recordings and we all got together to hear them, when we heard the caliber of this music that the bands were recording, we all just collectively knew, like, this has got to be pressed on vinyl. This has got to be something bigger.
Some of the stuff, and I know a lot of the artists and I'm familiar with some of the songs that are on there, and some were not done specifically for this album, even though they fit. And then there were others you told me that actually musicians sat down and put something together for the album.
Correct, and Hal, I think, is the first example. Hal Gelb's the first example that most of us know of. I think is that I was working with Hal on his record that was released in April, and I want to say it was just late January when he called me to actually consider using that song on the 7-inch that we put out for him. But instead, obviously we chose to leave it for this specific project. But yeah, so he wrote it, immediately.
Got to take a break. We're going to listen to another cut from the album. When we come back, we'll talk more about Luz de Vida. Stay with us.
Such is purely circumstantial. Now rain driplets wiggle, landscape seems to offer its own escape. Surviving in this place. Molly, go on and stand on your own 2 feet, even if you're standing with him. Oh, Molly, go on and stand on your own 2 feet, even if you're standing with him.
That's a live version of Molly by Brian Lopez, just another one of the tracks from Luz de Vida, and we're talking about that this morning. As we'll show it at the end, but let's put it out there right now. How can people get this?
Directly, they can order it from our website from Fort Lowell Records, which is at fortlowell.blogspot.com. That's to get the vinyl if you want to order direct. You could also purchase it from a number of stores locally in Tucson as well as in Phoenix that carry vinyl records. Zia is an example, Bookman's. All of the places that carry it locally have waived any consignment fees that they would have had normally. So, and they insure as well all of the. So
100% of the proceeds are going to go to the Tucson Together Fund.
Correct.
And this is the vinyl version. Obviously, there's pretty much that's something you got to hold in your hand. Now there's the digital alternative. What about that?
That's available on iTunes and Amazon, which are kind of two of the main places people buy MP3s online. There should be a number of other outlets worldwide that pick it up that kind of are feeder sites off of like an iTunes or Amazon, but those are your two main two. And
one of the things about some of the musicians who are on here, we just heard Brian Lopez and some of the others, they have a following outside the United States, and it would seem that the more awareness that's generated of this compilation in places like Germany and France and United Kingdom, that would spur sales. Have you seen, even at this juncture, an indication that people overseas are downloading it? Yeah, absolutely, and that was originally our idea of reaching out to, well, not only just the national bands, but to your point, I mean, there's a lot of the artists that we did reach out to in Tucson. A lot of them do have that, attractive audience outside of Tucson. So absolutely, from the get-go, we had worldwide sales direct with us as well as online as well. Do you see, I mean, these things can be difficult to market, and certainly there's interest, as with most music, there's interest up front initially, and then they kind of wane. With something that is unique as this, is this something that would be hoped for, especially with the downloads, that they would continue pretty steady well through 2012? I believe so. Absolutely. There's been a lot of support online from blog sites and such, and that's the same thing, that they feed off of each other. The publicity that goes behind that. When one reports on it, 3 others see that and they report on it, and we certainly have seen that the sales continue to be steady throughout. Yeah,
and we had expected to see some slow sales. We don't come from a place of an existing marketing machine. We're not a major record label. This is just something that people in Tucson have gotten together to do. So as we spread the word, there's been some good local coverage, but we're working on more national news, and it's just something that will take time to make people aware of. And a number of the artists too have actually offered to take the records with them to their shows. That was what I was going to ask. It would seem to me that some of these artists will be missing the boat if they're not selling them at their shows. I know the Holy Rolling Empire, they want to take it out on the road with them to some places, and so they've asked for that, and other artists as well have suggested that. So yeah, that'll help spread the message. So when it comes to the fund now, obviously the anticipation is that there'll be some replenishment from projects like this. Are there other things like this that are planned over the course of this year in particular that will give people an opportunity to continue to support the Tucson Together Fund?
There will be. Right now we don't have anything in the works, but there's a lot going on right now around January 8th, and for all the funds. And right now this is really our primary fundraiser.
And I would suspect that if anybody is watching us right now and feels the need to write a check, that they can certainly do that. And again, we'll show your contact point. But to me, it just seems like you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You'd have something to hold in your hand if you bought the album, the vinyl version in a store, or even downloaded it. the money still is going to find its way to the Tucson Together Fund. As you saw the fund generate and began to manage that, and then saw groups like Music Against Violence form and come together with you, and I'll start with you, Bill. What were your thoughts halfway through 2011 in the aftermath of January 8 as we saw some really positive things come out of this? Well,
initially, things were, there was a big influx of cash and people wanting to donate and get involved somehow, and very concerned about the survivors from the tragedy. And we received calls from different groups that wanted to do something. There was a company in California that wanted to sell T-shirts, for $20 and give us $1 from every shirt. And we said, no, that's we think that's promoting you more than it is the fund to help the victims of this event. So when I got a call from Eric, it was like, this sounds really great. It's something that's solid. It's something that's here in Tucson. It just felt right, and we embraced it. We've been promoting it. It's it's grown over the last few months. So it's the response both here and nationally and abroad is just really wonderful, and it's all going to go to benefit the families of that tragedy.
And from the Music Against Violence perspective, as we look ahead, what's your thoughts on what has come out of this?
Well, first and foremost, just a lot of amazing music. Some of these bands had friends who were involved in this shooting. One was a nurse at UMC that day. Having worked for Gabby and knowing Gabby and Ron Barber and Gabe Zimmerman, I had some personal grief that kind of fueled my interest in doing this. So everyone has really come together with a great kind of artistic sense of how do we move forward, how do we deal with this healing, what can we offer to our fellow people in Tucson, and the feeling will last.
Thank you guys very much for what you've done for the community, on behalf of the community, and giving a lot of your time and effort and into this project. Bill, thank you for what you've done, and I mean, it's not like you don't have enough on your plate anyway. then you take this on, and let's hope that something positive continues to come out of this. Again, thank you very much for being with us.